Welcome to the DX Today podcast, where you get facts, not hype.
And that opening commitment has never been more vital. I mean, if there's a field currently drowning in noise, in vaporware, and financial agendas, it is the world of artificial intelligence.
I feel that frustration so keenly. I open my feeds, and it is just this relentless barrage, a new breakthrough. Every single hour, a company claiming they've unlocked AGI.
Or a pundit assuring you that you're already behind if you're not using their brand new tool.
Exactly. It's exhausting. And for you, the listener, who just wants the shortcut to being genuinely well-informed, the whole environment feels less like an innovation explosion and more like, I don't know, an information integrity crisis.
That is precisely the subject of our deep dive today. We've got a really powerful stack of sources, some research papers, and even regulatory frameworks that they dissect this crisis perfectly. And the central kind of uncomfortable truth is structural.
Okay.
Our sources highlight what they call the expert industrial complex.
That sounds a little bit like we should be wearing tinfoil hats, but I'm guessing it's based on some cold, hard economics.
It's entirely based on economics. The assertion, and we have to treat this as, a working hypothesis that's backed by data, is that something like 98% of the voices you hear have a financial agenda.
98%.
Just think about the incentive structure for a second. Almost everyone commenting on AI is in some way trying to monetize it. They're selling a course, they're selling a proprietary tool, consultancy hours.
Or they're selling investment opportunities.
Right. So the profit motive, it completely subordinates the truth motive.
Hype sells.
Hype drives immediate sales and engagement. Presenting the inconvenient facts, the limitations, the incredibly high costs, the statistical flaws, the systemic biases, well, that slows down the sales cycle. The structural incentive for monetization is inherently in conflict with the mission of providing unbiased, verified reality.
Okay, so our mission for this deep dive is to move beyond that superficial, noise-driven influencer economy.
And establish a robust, reliable verification stack. We're not looking for charismatic founders or these really compelling narratives. We're looking for institutional structures that are, by their very design, insulated from that pressure to hype things up.
I see. So we're talking about 4 structural pillars of credibility.
That's right. These are entities and mechanisms that, because of their funding or their mandate or even their legal structure, are just designed for long-term truth-seeking over short-term profit. We're talking academic rigor, independent research, standardization and governance, and algorithmic auditing.
And by analyzing a claim against these 4 pillars, you, the learner, get an instant, powerful filter.
Let's get into it.
Okay, so let's unpack this crisis of authority first. The sources are so clear that the democratization of content publishing has just led to a massive deterioration of the signal-to-noise ratio.
It has.
It really feels like the core challenge is information asymmetry.
It is absolutely asymmetry. The barrier to entry for creating content has completely collapsed. So now you have these incredibly complex, technically demanding topics, like large language model infrastructure or novel neural network architectures.
And they're being discussed by people who might have excellent marketing skills.
Right, but they lack the fundamental technical literacy to actually vet the claims they're making. And when those insights are driven by vendor incentives, meaning they're subtly, or sometimes not so subtly, promoting their own tool, the audience, the buyer, is at a huge disadvantage.
They just don't know where the facts end and where the sales pitch begins.
It becomes a real challenge of institutional trust. I mean, we're conditioned to trust credentials, but if those credentials are self-granted or worse, compromised by a sales quota, they're basically worthless.
So the solution isn't to trust the personality.
No, you have to trust the structural design. We need to reject trust in charisma and anchor our confidence in verifiable structures that mandate transparency and accountability.
I understand the need for that defense mechanism. But let me introduce a friction point here. AI moves at a breakneck pace. We're talking months, even weeks, matter.
Of course.
The institutions you're proposing, academia, government bodies, they're notoriously slow. How can a slow-moving, verification-centric structure keep pace with an incredibly fast-moving, hype-centric industry?
That is the essential trade-off, and it's a really profound challenge. Speed is the enemy of rigor. But the answer is that these institutions don't track hype. They track foundational, verifiable breakthroughs and systemic risks.
Oh, okay. That's a key distinction.
But while the industry is moving fast on product iteration, the foundational mathematical principles or the regulatory definitions of what harm is, those move much more slowly. We need these slow, sturdy pillars to act as an anchor to ensure that when a claim is made, it's tethered to reality, even if that tether takes, say, a year to forge.
So it's a reframe of their utility. We're trading that immediate gratification for long-term certainty.
Yeah.
Okay, let's detail these 4 pillars that provide that certainty.
Our first pillar, the base layer, is academic rigor and peer review. This is, hands down, the highest standard for technical truth. It demands verifiable methodology.
The second pillar, which feels like the ethical and societal layer, is independent research institutes. So these are the nonprofits, the ones funded to operate outside of big tech to provide that necessary sharp-edged critique.
Third is the legal and consensus layer, standardization and governance bodies. This is where we look for consensus definitions of risk, fairness, and safety, which are then enforced either through, soft law-like guidelines or hard law actual legislation.
And finally, the verification layer, algorithmic auditing and technical transparency. This is the mechanism for external proof, for showing that the black box actually works as claimed when it's under adversarial third-party scrutiny.
And here's the takeaway. If you encounter an AI claim and you cannot trace its validity back to at least one of these 4 pillars, if its only source is, say, an influencer, a blog, or a self-published white paper, you should just assume statistically that it is compromised by a financial agenda.
Let's jump into that first pillar then, the bedrock of technical truth. The academic ecosystem.
Let's do it.
You call peer-reviewed academia the bedrock. But, critics often dismiss it as being too slow or too theoretical compared to what's coming out of industry labs. So how do we justify its gold standard status against this flood of industry white papers that, they often come with really impressive sounding benchmarks?
The justification is entirely structural and methodological. An industry white paper is, by its very design, a product marketing document. It's tailored to showcase performance under optimal conditions, often against proprietary or, cherry-picked metrics.
Whereas an academic paper operates under a completely different contract.
A fundamentally different contract. It requires disclosure of methodology. You have to provide your full statistical rigor, your data set split, your baseline models, your whole environmental setup.
And that disclosure allows for something absolutely crucial: adversarial scrutiny.
Precisely. Unlike a marketing document, an academic submission is subjected to double-blind adversarial review by rival experts who are, frankly, incentivized to find flaws in your work.
Right.
If a methodological error is discovered, the paper gets rejected, and the research team's professional reputation suffers. That structural penalty, the risk of peer rejection and reputational damage, that is the ultimate institutional safeguard that keeps the system honest.
Okay, but as our sources confirm, we have to differentiate. Academia is a massive ecosystem. It ranges from genuine high-caliber research to what the sources are calling the predatory conference circuit.
That's a real problem.
So we need to know which venues to trust.
The filter is absolutely necessary because low-quality journals or conferences often have a financial incentive just to accept volume. They might charge these article processing charges, or APCs, to the authors. So we only trust the Tier 1 venues, the elite conferences where acceptance rates are brutally low, often hovering between, say, 20 and 25%.
And that selectivity is what ensures novelty, rigor, and statistical significance.
Exactly. So let's talk about the specific Big 4 AI conferences, the crucibles where this foundational knowledge is actually forged.
Let's do it. Where do we start?
We start at the absolute apex, the premier global stage for deep learning, which is NeurIPS, the Conference on Neural Information Processing Systems. If a true foundational breakthrough in learning algorithms, optimization, or generative models is announced, it will inevitably pass through NeurIPS.
And what makes its review process stand out now beyond just the raw technical difficulty?
Well, it's the growing ethical component. As AI has moved from the lab into society, NeurIPS has adapted by incorporating mandatory broader impact statements and ethics reviews.
That's huge.
It is. Researchers now must explicitly address potential negative consequences, misuse, bias, environmental impact of their work before it can even be considered. This acts as a really critical institutional checkpoint, ensuring that corporate-backed research isn't just a product launch disguised as science. It has to confront its societal responsibility first.
Okay, so that's the main technical and ethical stage. Where do we go if we're looking for the underlying mathematical certainty?
That takes us to ICML, the International Conference on Machine Learning. ICML focuses really heavily on theoretical machine learning, statistical theory, mathematical guarantees. If a claim is made that an algorithm is fundamentally stable or that it guarantees convergence under certain conditions, the proof for that will be found at ICML.
And this is the conference that's notorious for its rejection criteria, right?
Yeah.
You can't just show that something works.
You have to prove why it works. Exactly. It stands as this vital bulwark against what we call AI alchemy.
AI alchemy, I like that.
The industry, fueled by massive compute, often just engages in trial and error. They tweak settings until a good result emerges, but without understanding the underlying mechanism. ICML demands methodological purity. It forces researchers to abandon that black box mentality and articulate the fundamental principles that govern their model's behavior.
Which ensures the knowledge is transferable and robust, not just some one-off performance feat.
That's the goal. And finally, you have the broader conferences, AAA and IJCAI.
What's their unique role in this ecosystem?
They ensure the field retains its breadth. While NeurIPS and ICML lean so heavily towards deep learning, AAAI, the Association for the Advancement of Artificial Intelligence, and IJCAI embrace symbolic AI, knowledge representation, logic, and planning.
And that diversity is becoming more and more essential for solving modern AI problems, correct?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about LLM hallucination. Deep learning models are fantastic at pattern recognition, but they lack factual grounding. The solution often lies in neurosymbolic approaches, combining the power of the neural network with structured knowledge bases and logic systems.
And AAI and IJCAI are where that kind of hybrid research gets vetted.
They prevent the entire conversation from devolving into just a deep learning echo chamber.
Okay, moving beyond general AI, the sources really emphasize that generalist influencers simply cannot vet claims in specialized domains. We have to rely on domain-specific rigor.
When the stakes are high, the peer review community shrinks to only the highest density experts. Take computer vision. This is critical for autonomous vehicles, robotics, deepfake detection.
The definitive sources there would be CVPR and ICCV.
Right. Any claims of achieving state-of-the-art or SOTA in areas like image segmentation or object tracking, they have to pass through these venues. The reviewers there are experts at spotting those subtle methodological biases.
Like the classic anecdote about the model identifying a wolf.
The wolf versus the husky? Yeah. The model isn't looking at the animal at all, it's just looking at the background. If there's snow, it calls it a wolf. A CVPR reviewer, by demanding rigorous testing against diverse, clean data sets, is specifically looking to dismantle those false claims of SOTA that result from, methodological shortcuts or dataset leakage.
And in medical AI, the need for rigor shifts from just being correct to being clinically reliable. The stakes are, well, they're life and death.
Lethally high, yes. The core Tier 1 venues here are MI-CAI and the really remarkable IPMI, which is Information Processing and Medical Imaging. IPMI has been running continuously since 1969.
Wow, since 1969.
Yeah, so it provides a historical depth and statistical stringency that predates and is therefore totally immune to the current AI gold rush. Any claim of a new diagnostic algorithm that hasn't passed this level of scrutiny, you should just dismiss it as high-risk hype. It lacks clinical relevance.
That establishes a really clear hierarchy of verification. But let me press on a challenge to this pillar. Access. If I'm an independent developer or journalist, accessing these journals often costs hundreds of dollars per paper. Isn't the publishing process itself a kind of filter that favors big tech access?
That is an excellent point, and it leads us directly to the concept of democratizing truth through what's called diamond open access. Our sources identify this as a counter-movement to the profit motive that's inherent in traditional publishing models.
Okay, explain diamond open access. How does it eliminate that financial incentive?
Well, traditional publishing often relies on either subscription fees, paywalls, or article processing charges, APCs. That's a fee paid by the author to make the article free to the reader. Diamond open access charges neither. It's maintained by nonprofits, academic libraries, research collectives, so it completely eliminates the financial motivation to accept a paper for volume or revenue.
And the premier example in the AI world?
The Journal of Machine Learning Research, JMLR. It is volunteer-run, has no APCs, and has a globally revered reputation. Its operational model is pure scientific validity. It's the definitive flag for the purest source of verified technical information.
So just to be clear for the listener, if a paper is published in a gold open access journal where the APCs are high, you just need to remember that an institutional volume incentive exists. The diamond model, however, has safeguards against that.
Precisely. And this all leads to the necessary tension of the academic sphere. Arc of reach?
Ah, the wild west of preprints. Necessary for speed, but really dangerous for reliability.
ARCGIS is fundamental. The 6 to 12-month lag time for a Tier 1 conference acceptance is just intolerable in a field that iterates daily. ARCGIS gives you immediate dissemination. But, and this is a critical warning, ARCGIS is a moderation queue, not a scientific validation queue.
And corporations use it to give a flashy white paper a veneer of academic legitimacy without any real review.
All the time. So you have to use filters. You have to look for three things. First, subsequent acceptance. Did the paper eventually get accepted into NeurIPS or ICML? Second, institutional reputation. Did it come from a reputable, transparent lab like Google DeepMind or a nonprofit like Ai2? And third, most critically, code availability. Is the full implementation code openly accessible?
And if it doesn't meet those criteria?
If it's just a descriptive paper sponsored by a company with no code and no subsequent peer review, you have to treat it as a press release until proven otherwise.
So the bedrock of technical truth is built. Now let's move to our second pillar, independent research institutes.
Let's do it. This structural layer is absolutely essential for providing unbiased facts about AI's impact on society and the economy.
So why does the legal and funding structure matter so much here? I mean, why can't we just trust big tech labs to be ethical?
It's not about individual malice. It's about institutional mandate. Big tech labs are, at the end of the day, responsible to shareholders and quarterly revenue targets.
Right.
The nonprofit structure, especially when it's funded by diversified philanthropic sources, grants from major foundations like Ford, MacArthur, or Sloan, it gives them institutional distance. They are not beholden to corporate roadmaps.
Which gives them the freedom to publish critique that might actually harm a big tech company's bottom line.
Exactly. They are structured to serve as the long-term conscience of the industry.
Let's start with a really crucial example of that independence and transparency. The Allen Institute for AI, or AI2.
AI2 is a definitive 501c3 organization. It was founded by Paul Allen and is dedicated to scientific discovery for the common good. They operate under an open philosophy that directly challenges the proprietary black box model of AI development.
And the prime example of that is the OMO initiative, the open language model. This is where the distinction between just open and truly open becomes crystal clear.
Precisely. When a commercial lab releases a model, let's say Meta's LaMMA, they typically just release the model weights. That's like giving you the final baked cake.
Okay.
AI2's ALMO initiative goes so much further. They release the weights, yes, but also the data used for training, the full training code, the training logs, and the evaluation suite.
So they don't just give you the cake. They give you the recipe, the ingredients, and the oven temperature log.
That is the perfect analogy. This total transparency is crucial. It's what fully demystifies the black box, allowing any independent researcher to reproduce the results, to scrutinize every decision made during training, and to verify or debunk the underlying claims. This is the highest standard of technical truth you'll find outside of a Tier 1 peer review.
Okay, shifting to a more critical voice, let's discuss the Distributed AI Research Institute, or DAIR. This is a nonprofit designed to operate outside and often in direct opposition to big tech narratives.
DAIR, founded by Timnit Gebru, is explicitly community-rooted, and it challenges the entire economic underpinnings of the current AI bubble.
I find their critique, especially from Alex Hanna, fascinating. She argues that the VC model demands impossible growth targets, which leads to systemic overpromising.
Yes. The massive capital that gets injected requires revenue turnovers that the technology simply hasn't proven it can consistently generate yet, and that's what drives the whole machine of hype.
And DAIR pulls the lens away from abstract ideas like superintelligence and focuses on the material reality of the supply chain.
Their work on ghost work is essential here. They investigate the exploitative labor practices of the data annotators and content moderators, often in the Global South, who are the essential yet invisible human infrastructure powering these supposedly autonomous systems.
They transform the conversation from how intelligent is this model to who is being exploited to train it.
And that structural critique is only possible because their funding allows them to investigate labor rights without fear of losing a big tech sponsorship.
Even stricter in its independence is the AI Now Institute.
AI now focuses rigorously on policy, power, and political economy. And their stance is rare. They explicitly refuse all corporate funding. This is the highest form of institutional safeguard. It ensures they can critically assess and hold the industry accountable without any conflict of interest.
And what are they exposing that the mainstream media often misses?
Their analysis of AI nationalisms is a major contribution. They detail how public money is often funneled into private gain through these subsidized hybrid infrastructures,
So governments or universities invest heavily in high-performance computing centers.
which are then often co-opted or leveraged by private firms. It socializes the infrastructure risk while privatizing the financial gain. They show that AI isn't just a technological race, it's a concerted policy effort to concentrate power.
And on the technical grassroots side, we have Eleuther.ai.
Eleuther.ai started as a collective explicitly to counter the closed nature of OpenAI after GPT-3. They proved that open-source volunteer groups could train competitive large-scale language models like GPT-J and GPT-Neo-X.
But their focus wasn't just on scale, was it?
No, it was on mechanistic interpretability, which is incredibly rigorous work. They are leaders in trying to peek behind the curtain and understand the internal pugnative structure of a model, not just what it predicts, but how it arrives at that prediction. This moves beyond vague safety debates and grounds the conversation in technical reality.
And finally, the safety watchdogs, the Future of Life Institute, FLI.
FLI focuses on existential risk and governance. And crucially for our framework, they produce the AI Safety Index. This acts as a structural filter for hype because it functions as an independent consumer report.
So what does the index actually measure to cut through all the safety washing?
It ranks the major labs, Anthropic, DeepMind, you name it, on tangible transparency measures. Do they publicly report on the compute they use? Do they disclose their internal red teaming reports? Do they have a clear governance mechanism for catastrophic risk? By creating these verifiable rankings, FLI holds the company's safety claims accountable.
And prevents them from just claiming responsibility without providing any measurable proof.
Exactly.
Okay, that's a solid second pillar. Now for our third, the regulatory state and consensus-based truths.
Right. So if the first two pillars define technical and ethical truth, this pillar defines legal and consensus-based truth. These bodies move slowly, as we said, but when they act, their outputs, frameworks, and laws carry immense weight.
We're talking about establishing hard law and soft law to test claims against. And the U.S. gold standard for the soft law, the influential voluntary guidance, is the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST.
Their AI Risk Management Framework, AI RMF 1.0, is the essential reference document for any entity claiming their AI is trustworthy.
But the word voluntary seems like a loophole for companies that want to maximize hype. Why should we trust a voluntary framework?
Because of the legal gravity it carries. While it's voluntary, it is increasingly being cited in litigation and required by government contracts. It is the established national consensus on risk. And the framework itself provides this structured process based on 4 essential cyclical functions: govern, map, measure, and manage.
Let's elaborate on those because they provide the practical method for applying this filter.
So govern is the overhead structure, establishing the organizational commitment. Map is the critical first step in risk analysis. You have to proactively identify all relevant risks, input data bias, security vulnerabilities, negative impacts on specific user groups before you deploy.
Then you measure.
Right. You develop specific technical metrics for those risks. And finally, you manage. That's the organizational response to the measurements, ensuring continuous risk mitigation.
So if a company claims their AI is safe and fair, the true north verification question you ask them is, can you show me how you have mapped and measured the risks according to the NIST AI RMF 1.0?
Exactly. If they can't answer with specifics tied to those 4 functions, their claim is just marketing jargon. And crucially, NIST defines 7 concrete criteria for trustworthy AI: validity, safety, security, resiliency, explainability, privacy, and fairness. These are shared consensus definitions.
Okay, moving from voluntary guidance to certifiable global standards, our sources point to ISO/IEC 42001. This shifts the concept of truth from a guideline to a binary fact.
This standard, published in 2023, is monumental. It is not advisory. It is a certifiable standard for an artificial intelligence management system, or AIMS.
What does it mean that a standard is certifiable?
It means an external auditor can verify that your organization has the necessary controls in place to manage AI risk, similar to how quality is managed under ISO 9001. It uses the rigorous Plan-Do-Check-Act cycle.
So an ISO 42001 certification provides a verifiable binary stamp of approval. It cuts cleanly through the gray area of self-attestation and vague promises of responsible AI.
It provides clarity. A company either has a verified management system for AI risk or it does not.
Now let's discuss the hardest form of regulatory truth, the EU AI Act, the world's first comprehensive AI law.
Published in July 2024, this is a defining source of legal definitions. Its mechanism, risk-based categorization, forces vendors and deployers to legally define their technology's potential harm.
Let's quickly detail those risk tiers, starting with the highest.
First, unacceptable risk systems are outright banned. Practices like untargeted facial scraping, certain forms of predictive policing, or social scoring systems used by public authorities. Then you have the vast critical category of high-risk systems. Those used in medical devices, critical infrastructure, law enforcement, education, employment screening. These systems require strict conformity assessments, mandatory quality management systems, human oversight, and detailed documentation.
So take an AI used in recruitment. Before the act, a vendor might claim their system is unbiased.
Post-act, that system is high risk. The vendor is now legally obligated to provide detailed, verifiable documentation on the data used, the risk mapping, and how they checked for bias. If they market it as unbiased and the documentation shows otherwise, they face substantial legal penalties.
And that's the crucial counterhype mechanism. The Act mandates that technical documentation for high-risk systems must be legally binding. It basically criminalizes vaporware in these high-stakes sectors.
It shifts the burden of proof. The vendor can no longer rely on ambiguity. The law forces a legally verifiable truth into the commercial pipeline.
And finally, within this regulatory pillar, we have to mention the OECD.AI Policy Observatory.
The OECD Observatory provides a data-driven reality check that the listener must use to balance all those corporate success narratives. They maintain a global AI incidence database, tracking where AI systems have failed, caused harm, or been misused.
So while the industry is telling us about the 99% success rate, the OECD is tracking the 1% catastrophic failures.
Precisely. It provides the verified data on the reality of deployment, grounded in official reports. It's the essential resource for cutting through success-only narratives and understanding the true rate and nature of systemic failure.
Okay, that brings us to our fourth and final pillar, the audit economy and benchmarking. This is where we verify the claims of the black box in action.
And we have to learn to distinguish between genuine adversarial auditing and mere audit washing.
I worry that audit is just the latest term for company hiring someone to rubber stamp their product. We need to identify independent auditing firms who are structurally separated from the company they review.
The independence is paramount. Our sources highlight firms established explicitly to maintain that separation. First, ORCAA, founded by Cathy O'Neill. Their method isn't just checking code, it's a stakeholder query model.
For whom does it fail?
That is the defining question. They look beyond abstract metrics and investigate real-world impact on marginalized communities. Their audit of the recruiting platform HireVue is the canonical example.
The one that used facial analysis in video interviews.
Right. ORCAA's independent verification showed the inherent bias and lack of scientific grounding, and it led directly to HireVue dropping the entire feature. That is the tangible impact of adversarial, consequence-driven auditing.
And then there's the Etikas Foundation in Europe, pioneering adversarial algorithmic auditing.
Etikas specializes in reverse engineering systems to expose hidden biases. Their landmark case involved the VeoGen algorithm used by Spanish police to assess domestic violence risk. Etikas found that police officers were so reliant on the algorithmic risk score that they deferred to its automated recommendation 95% of the time.
That's terrifying. It shows the risk of outsourcing critical human judgment to an unverified black box.
It does. Etikas' audit didn't just find technical bias, it found a structural dependency. It exposed the reality of deployment.
Which brings us back to the audit washing trap. If a company can just hire an internal team or a friendly consultancy, how does the listener avoid being misled?
You have to look for structural disincentives for the auditor to approve the system. If the auditor's contract depends entirely on future work from that client, they are financially incentivized to just rubber stamp it.
So the filter is to demand third-party audits that explicitly reference hard standards, NIST, ISO, or the EU AI Act. The audit has to be verifiable against an external consensus framework.
Exactly. Our sources summarize this in a trust hierarchy. Highest trust is the adversarial audit, which actively tries to break the system. Medium-high trust is the compliance audit, verifying against a known standard like ISO 42001.
And at the low end, you have the self-serving internal audit and the very low-trust consultancy review, which is often just a high-level report with no real technical depth.
Right. And beyond auditing the system, we must audit the claims of performance or benchmarking. The whole leaderboard ecosystem is another deep source of contamination. Companies routinely cherry-pick metrics or accidentally train on their test data, leading to these inflated, meaningless claims of soda.
We need a system designed for honesty. That brings us to the gold standard, Stanford HELM.
HELM, the holistic evaluation of language models, is the most rigorous framework available. It understands that trusting accuracy alone is irresponsible. HELM tests models not just on one metric, but across 42 distinct scenarios against 7 core metrics.
7 distinct metrics. Let's detail those, because this is how you filter a cherry-picked performance claim.
Okay, so obviously you have accuracy, but crucially, you also have calibration. Does the model know when it's wrong? For high-stakes applications like medicine, knowing when the AI is uncertain is more important than a slightly higher accuracy number.
And then robustness.
How easily does the model break if the prompt is slightly different? And then you have the ethical metrics: fairness, bias, and toxicity. And finally, they track efficiency. How much compute and energy is required to run the model? It's a critical transparency metric.
Okay, so that's the gold standard for statistical truth. For a more dynamic, real-world vibe check, especially for conversational models, we look to the LMSYS chatbot arena.
This is a crowdsourced, open-source model that uses the ELO rating system, like in chess, to rank models. Users chat with 2 anonymous models side by side and just vote on which response is better.
And why is this method so difficult for companies to game?
Because the prompts are dynamically generated by hundreds of thousands of real humans in real time. The companies can't optimize their models for a static known test set. The ELO score provides a transparent, constantly updated market price for model quality based on real user preference.
Okay, before we conclude, let's talk about the final layer of defense against hype: technical literacy and data provenance. To truly filter the noise, you need to understand the underlying mechanics.
You have to demand a math-first approach. Hype uses words like magic, emergent, or reasoning. Rigor uses terms like matrix multiplication, gradient descent, and attention mechanism. Understanding the mathematics demystifies the entire operation.
And our sources highlight several phenomenal resources for this, like 3 Blue, 1 Brown.
Grant Sanderson's visual series on neural networks is foundational. By using rigorous calculus visualizations, he shows that learning is simply an optimization process. When you internalize that truth, it becomes impossible to sustain the magical thinking that leads to claims of imminent sentience.
And similarly, the work of JMLR, like the Illustrated Transformer, provides that high-fidelity visualization of data flow.
He visually breaks down complex concepts. It provides the necessary factual grounding to approach claims of superior performance with a healthy technical skepticism. You start asking, show me the flow, show me the matrices, not tell me the story.
And beyond the introductory concepts, we need researcher-led analysis that synthesizes the flood of Tier 1 papers.
Yes, and the filter here is the source's intent. People like Lillian Wang, with her LilLog, synthesized dozens of cutting-edge papers into technical distilled notes. She writes for other researchers, so her analysis is devoid of commercial fluff. The same goes for Sebastian Raschke and his Ahead of AI newsletter.
This type of technical literacy is paramount. It shifts you from being a passive consumer of AI claims to an active, informed evaluator. Okay, finally, let's look at the provenance of data. Understanding where the training data comes from reveals some massive legal and ethical shaky ground.
The backbone of almost every major language model is data scraped by the Common Crawl Foundation.
Explain the controversy here. It's a nonprofit, but it's often viewed with suspicion.
Well, Common Crawl is essential infrastructure. It stores petabytes of web data, but investigations suggest it functions as a data laundering mechanism. By scraping billions of pages, including copyrighted and paywalled content, it effectively provides commercial entities with a backdoor to the world's intellectual property.
Under the guise of supporting a nonprofit utility.
Exactly. And for image models, we have Ai2, the large-scale AI open network used by systems like Stable Diffusion. The critical legal insight here comes from the Hamburg District Court ruling in Germany. The court confirmed that Ai2 scraping was permissible under EU text and data mining exceptions.
But this is the key.
It hinged almost entirely on its status as a nonprofit conducting scientific research. That provides the legal distinction between science AI, which often operates under TDM exceptions with transparent data, and commercial AI, which has a much shakier legal basis for using that same copyrighted data for profit.
This has been an incredibly deep and structured approach to filtering AI claims. The overarching discipline we've established is the discipline of verification.
And the first, most crucial, actionable step for you, the listener, is behavioral. Reject feed. Do not allow algorithmic feeds, LinkedIn, X, YouTube to dictate what AI knowledge you consume. Those platforms are optimized for the engagement generated by fear and hype, not for the delivery of boring, verifiable facts.
Instead, you adopt the verification stack as your constant filter. Let's just quickly anchor the listener back to the 4 layers of defense we've built.
At the foundation layer, you demand scientific validity. You look for the fierce adversarial scrutiny of Tier 1 conferences like NeurIPS and ICML, or the pure financial insulation of diamond open access journals like JMLR.
At the risk layer, you demand verifiable safety and trustworthiness. You look for mapping against consensus standards like the NIST AI RMF, or ideally, an ISO 42001 certification, and you use the OECD incidence database to balance the success narratives with data on systemic failures.
At the performance layer, you demand objective, holistic metrics. You look past cherry-picked benchmarks and insist on evaluations from Stanford Helm across all 7 metrics. You use the dynamic reality check of the LMSYS chatbot arena.
And at the ethics and impact layer, you demand accountability and distance. You look to independent nonprofits like DAIR and AI Now, or the adversarial auditing firms like ORCAA and Ethicus, which are structurally free to offer critique and demand tangible change.
And remember, the 2 simple, ultimate questions you must ask every single time you encounter an AI claim, report, or pitch. First, how is this entity funded? If the answer is diversified philanthropic funds, proceed with high trust. If it's internal audit or venture capital funding, proceed with extreme caution.
And the second question, is the code, the data, and the training methodology open? Demand the level of transparency we see from Ai2's Olmo initiative. If the system is a complete black box, the claim is, by definition, unverifiable and unworthy of your trust.
So what does this discipline teach us? It teaches that the path to becoming truly well-informed is counterintuitive. Verified truth is not found in charismatic delivery or founder ambition or follower counts. It is found in boring, slow, often legally defined institutional structures, in the rigorous statistical review of an IPMI paper, in the technical definitions of NIST, or in the meticulous legal framework of the EU AI Act.
The most difficult path, the path of verification, is the only one that yields verified truth, separating fact from hype.
And by adopting this discipline, you, the learner, construct an ultimate defense against the structural propaganda and financial agendas of the expert industrial complex. You stop consuming noise, and you start consuming knowledge.
And that, ultimately, is the highest form of well-informed intelligence. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.